There are moments in South Asian politics when events move so quickly and so unexpectedly that even seasoned observers struggle to process what has happened, and Bangladesh's latest political rupture is one of those moments. The announcement that former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been sentenced to death, delivered by the International Crimes Tribunal in Dhaka, has left the political landscape unsettled and the international community scrambling for clarity. The decision follows months of hearings, rising tensions on the streets, and a dramatic collapse of Hasina's decades-long grip on power. For viewers trying to make sense of how the country arrived here, this story begins well before the verdict, in the upheaval of mid-2024, when a student-led uprising transformed into the most significant challenge to the Awami League in over a decade. Hasina, who is now 78 years old, was ousted from office in August 2024 after weeks of protests that paralyzed Dhaka and spread across major cities. The uprising had begun as a movement led by university students demanding reforms, transparency, and accountability, but rapidly evolved into a nationwide revolt against her administration. As the unrest intensified, security forces were deployed, and according to findings presented in court, they used lethal force under directives that prosecutors argued came from the very top AUN assessment, later estimated that between mid-July and early August 2024, as many as 1,400 people may have been killed and several thousand injured, marking the worst episode of violence Bangladesh had seen since its 1971 independence war. Hasina fled to India shortly after her government collapsed, and her refusal to appear before the tribunal shaped much of the political and legal discourse that followed. The trial itself took place in her absence, with the court appointing a state defense lawyer to represent her. Throughout the proceedings, Hasina insisted from hiding in India that the charges were politically motivated and the tribunal lacked legitimacy. She maintained that because the current Bangladeshi administration came to power without public mandate, any case against her under its institutions would be fundamentally unfair. Her son and political advisor, Sajib Wazed, echoed this perspective when speaking to the media, stating that they would consider an appeal only if elections were held with the Awami League's participation. For her supporters, the trial symbolized a broader effort to erase her political legacy. For her opponents, it represented an unprecedented moment of accountability for state violence. The tribunal's ruling was the culmination of months of witness testimonies, classified intelligence, and security force logs that prosecutors said established a chain of command linking the crackdown to Hasina's office. They argued that she had instructed security agencies to take all measures necessary to suppress the movement, and that these directives translated into live fire at protest sites, raids on student halls, and targeted operations against organizers. The prosecution framed the actions as crimes against humanity, given the scale of casualties and the intention behind the operations. The defense attempted to dismiss the evidence as circumstantial, pointing to gaps in documentation and the absence of Hasina during the trial, but the tribunal ultimately ruled that the material presented showed clear responsibility for the violence. Bangladesh reacted to the verdict with anxiety and uncertainty. In the days preceding the ruling, at least 30 small bomb explosions and more than 24 vehicles were set ablaze across the country. While these incidents did not result in casualties, they highlighted the tensions simmering across cities such as Chittagong, Sylhet, Rajshahi, and Dhaka. Security forces increased deployments in sensitive districts, and political groups aligned with the Awami League warned that the verdict could destabilize the already fragile social climate. Many in Bangladesh still remember the unrest in 2013 and 2014, and the possibility of new waves of political confrontation has renewed concerns among civil society organizations. 6. One of the most complicated aspects of the verdict is the immediate diplomatic challenge it created. Following the announcement, the Bangladeshi government formally requested that India extradite Hasina, and former Interior Minister Asaduzzaman Khan Kamal Dhaka pointed to an existing bilateral extradition treaty, arguing that India was legally bound to cooperate. New Delhi, however, issued a carefully worded statement noting that it had taken note of the verdict and emphasized its commitment to the welfare of the Bangladeshi people without addressing the extradition demand directly. Analysts believe India is unlikely to act swiftly, given the political sensitivity and the potential domestic backlash in Bangladesh that any such move could set off. For many Bangladeshis, the roots of this crisis go deeper than a single court ruling. Hasina, who dominated Bangladeshi politics for nearly 15 years in her most recent tenure, built a political structure that combined rapid economic growth with centralized authority and a weakening of institutional checks. Critics argued for years that her administration increasingly relied on security agencies and party-aligned bureaucratic networks to maintain control. The 2024 student uprising exposed the vulnerability of that system, when its legitimacy eroded and its capacity to manage dissent diminished. The violent response to the protests served as a breaking point, leaving the country grappling with questions of accountability and political transition. The international response to the sentence has been cautious but concerned. Human rights organizations have highlighted the scale of the 2024 casualties as a reminder that the grievances leading to the revolt remain unresolved. Several foreign ministries described the verdict as a significant moment that could shape Bangladesh's political trajectory ahead of the early 2025 parliamentary elections. With the Awami League barred from contesting, the election landscape has dramatically shifted, and many observers fear that the ruling may deepen political polarization. For Bangladesh's millions of young voters, especially those who participated in the 2024 movement, the verdict represents both a symbolic victory and an uncertain future. As Bangladesh stands at a crossroads, the aftermath of the conviction raises pressing questions. Can the country navigate a political transition without descending into further unrest? Will the legal and diplomatic standoff between Dhaka and New Delhi escalate? And what does this moment mean for the broader fabric of Bangladeshi democracy? What is clear is that the sentence against Sheikh Hasina has reshaped the national conversation. It has reopened debates about state power, accountability, and the legacy of long-serving leaders in South Asia. The coming months, especially as elections draw closer, will determine whether Bangladesh moves towards stability, or whether this verdict becomes the starting point of a prolonged political crisis.